It was front page news all over the world today. John Wayne was dead. In Tokyo, the headline read, "Mr. America passes on."
John Wayne, better known as the Duke, was one of Hollywood's biggest stars. His career, it stretched over 5 decades. During that time, he became the face of American values: strong, tough, always playing the hero. You see him in westerns and war movies, and he is always the guy who stands tall. He just had this presence on screen. He became the image of the American man. But off the screen, Wayne was more than just the cowboy or soldier people saw in movies. He was born Marion Robert Morrison back in 1907. His rise to fame, it wasn't fast. He had to work hard for it. Nothing came easy. But by the 1940s and 1950s, Wayne had made it. Movies like Stagecoach, The Searchers, and True Grit turned him into a big name. People saw him as the tough guy, the one who didn't always want to be the hero, but had to be. That became his thing. Even though his movie roles made him a legend, Wayne's personal life and health struggles showed a whole other side of him. He battled cancer twice. First, in 1964, when he was told he had lung cancer. Then again in the 1970s, when it came back in his stomach. But even with all of that, Wayne kept going. He kept working. He didn't stop. He kept up that tough guy image, just like the characters he played. By the time Wayne got to the end of his life, he had seen it all. The fame, the highs, the lows. The fans adored him. But there was always the pressure to stay the strong, tough guy. When his last days came, people didn't see the cowboy or the war hero. They saw a husband, a father. A man is facing the end of his life. His last words, spoken to his daughter, showed a side of him most people never knew. Even though Wayne spent his career being the tough guy, his last moments reminded everyone that, in the end, even icons are human. So last words, they were full of love. Full of tenderness. They showed how much he cared for his family. It was a side of John Wayne that people hadn't seen before, but it completed the picture. Even in the end, he carried himself with the same grace and strength that made him a legend. John Wayne passed away in 1979. When he did, it felt like the end of an era in Hollywood. His influence on movies, especially westerns, was massive. But his legacy, it's bigger than his films. It's in how he lived his life, the way he stayed strong, his deep love for his country, and how, in the end, he showed that even the strongest heroes are human, too. The declining health of a giant. By the late 1970s, John Wayne's health was getting worse. Fast. The people close to him, they knew. He was fighting a battle much tougher than any role he ever played. In 1964, Wayne got lung cancer. He'd been smoking for years. Everyone knew that. After surgery to remove a lung and some ribs, he beat it. I got right back to work. That's who he was. Tough, resilient. But over time, his health kept slipping. Then, in the 1970s, cancer came back. This time, it hit his stomach. His once strong body started to change. He lost a lot of weight. His voice, the deep one everyone knew, it wasn't the same anymore, weaker. But even then, Wayne didn't stop. He kept working. I kept pushing through all the pain. Chemo. Treatment. Didn't matter. He wasn't letting any of it slow him down. One of his last movies was The Suitist, back in 1976. He played an old gunfighter dying of cancer. It was almost like his own story. A lot of people thought that. Critics loved it. They could tell the role was personal. Wayne was dealing with cancer in real life, too. His performance, it felt powerful, as if he were showing people how he saw death. Calm, accepting, but still fighting. So as things got worse, Wayne made fewer public appearances. His last one, April 1979, just a couple of months before he died. It was at the Academy Awards. He looked frail, but the crowd gave him a standing ovation. It went on for minutes. He gave a short speech, thanked his fans. He still had that same strength, the one everyone loved. But his family, they knew. They knew he was in constant pain. His body was tired from all those years of fighting. Wayne spent his last months with his family and close friends. His health kept getting worse, but his spirit, it stayed strong. That's what people remember. He faced his illness the same way he faced everything else tough. In those last moments, he wasn't the cowboy or the soldier. He was just a man, thinking about life and death. But he knew his legacy would live on. John Wayne's fight with cancer showed the real strength behind the legend. Even in his darkest days, he kept going. That's who he was, on screen and off. A warrior spirit, John Wayne's fight against cancer. John Wayne, known for his tough, no-nonsense style on and off screen, showed that same toughness in his battle with cancer. It started back in 1964. That's when he was diagnosed with lung cancer. Wayne had to go through a serious surgery. It took out one of his lungs and a few of his ribs, but not long after that, he was back on set, doing the hard roles that made him famous. Most people couldn't believe it. Coming back to work that soon after surgery, it showed how determined Wayne was. Even in Hollywood, people were amazed. He wasn't the type to slow down. He kept that strong image, the one his fans loved, and most of the public didn't even know how serious things were. When asked about it, Wayne called himself a tough SOB. That was him, through and through. Gritty, strong, always pushing through. For the next decade, he kept surprising people. He kept taking on tough roles, even as his health started to slip. Then, in the 1970s, cancer came back. This time, in his stomach. It was the beginning of his final fight with the disease. But even with that diagnosis, Wayne didn't stop. He faced it with the same toughness. He didn't let cancer define him. He wanted to keep working and keep living his life the way he wanted. And he did. In 1976, Wayne took on his last role. The movie was called The Shootist. It was about an old gunfighter dying of cancer. For Wayne, that part hit close to home. It mirrored his own life. He played it with a kind of honesty because he knew how real it was. Critics loved it. They praised his performance. It felt personal, like he was showing the world how he was dealing with his mortality. In many ways, The Shootist was his goodbye to the movies, his final act. But behind the scenes, it was hard. Wayne was going through tough treatments, chemotherapy, other procedures. It all took a toll on him. But even though his body was weakening, Wayne never let it break his spirit. He kept fighting. He refused to give in. He didn't let cancer take away his dignity. His closest friends and family saw it. Even in pain, he kept going. He stayed strong. That's what people remember most about him. John Wayne's battle with cancer wasn't just about survival. It was about who he was. He faced it the same way he faced every challenge in life, head on, without backing down. His last years showed the world his true strength. He wasn't just fighting for his life. He was fighting to leave a legacy of strength, courage, resilience. His family by his side. The final days. As John Wayne's health worsened in those final months, his family became his biggest source of comfort. Wayne wasn't the towering Hollywood star everyone knew in those last days. He was just a father, a husband, a friend, surrounded by the people who loved him the most. His children, like his daughter Asa, stayed by his side. They did everything they could to ease his pain. They wanted to make those last days as peaceful as possible. Wayne's family wasn't new to his health battles. They had already seen him through lung cancer in the 1960s. They had watched him go through that and knew how hard it had been on him. But this time, it was different. The cancer had spread to his stomach, and Wayne was getting weaker. The strength that had carried him through life was fading. Even though his body was giving up, Wayne still carried himself with dignity. It was the toughness he had always shown in his career. Asa Wayne especially had a close bond with her father. She was with him during some of his final moments, and she was the one who shared his last words. In those final days, there were times when Wayne drifted in and out of consciousness. He wasn't always aware of what was happening. But in one moment of clarity, he looked at Asa. He spoke his final words to her. "Of course, I know who you are. You're my girl. I love you." Those words were simple, but they meant everything. They showed the love and pride he felt for his family. Wayne's last moments weren't full of big speeches or grand gestures. Instead, they were quiet, personal, intimate, filled with love. His family stayed by his bedside. They cherished every word, every moment, knowing that the end was near. For Wayne's family, watching him slip away was hard. So hard. He had always seemed larger than life, almost invincible. But now, they saw the fragility that comes with illness. Yet, even in those final moments, Wayne showed that strength everyone knew him for. He fought till the very end, not just for himself, for his family too. His children, like Michael and Patrick, often talked about their father's pride and determination in those last days. Wayne never wanted to be seen as weak. Even as cancer took its toll, he stayed stoic. He refused to let the pain break him. It was like he was living out one of the characters he had played throughout his career. His family respected his wishes. They kept his final days private. They made sure he passed away surrounded by love and dignity. In those last moments, Wayne's family found comfort. Just like he had been there for them all their lives, being there for him meant everything. His death was heartbreaking, but it was also a reminder of how strong those family bonds were. The love they shared, it didn't end with him. It stayed strong, even in the face of loss. The heartbreaking final words, "Of course I know who you are. You're my girl. I love you." In the final moments of John Wayne's life, the strong, tough persona everyone knew him for gave way to something softer. He wasn't the towering movie star anymore. He was a father, surrounded by family. His last words, they were for his daughter, Asa. As his health got worse, he drifted in and out of awareness. Asa asked him if he knew who she was. And then, in a brief, clear moment, he responded, "Of course I know who you are. You're my girl. I love you." Those words, simple, but they carried a lot of meaning. They showed the deep bond Wayne had with his children, especially Asa. Wayne was known for being tough and always strong. But those last words revealed his love as a father in that moment. The world knew him as this larger-than-life figure, always ready to face challenges head-on. But people saw a different side in that quiet exchange with his daughter. A softer, more personal side. A side not many people got to see. The power in those words wasn't just in what he said. It was that he could say them at all. Wayne's health had deteriorated so much that, by the end, he could barely speak. The cancer had spread from his stomach. He was weak and often he was unresponsive. So, for his family hearing those final words, it was a rare, precious moment. A brief connection amidst all the pain. Later, Asa shared those final moments in interviews. She talked about how much they meant to her. She had stayed by her father's side throughout his last days. She watched as the man she had always known to be so strong slowly faded away. Hearing him say, "I love you," it was a comfort, a reminder of how much love he had for his family. Even though cancer had taken so much from him, it couldn't take that. Wayne's final words also resonated with his fans. They had seen him as the symbol of strength and courage for years. He built his entire career around facing danger without flinching. But in his final moments, he showed that even the strongest people are vulnerable, especially in the face of death. His last words weren't about his career, accomplishments, or legacy. They were about family, the people he loved the most. Those last words marked more than just the end of John Wayne's life. They became part of the legacy he left behind. His children, especially Asa, would go on to share memories of their father. They ensured that his love for his family became just as important to his legacy as his work on screen. For his fans, his final words were a reminder, even legends are human. And in the end, what matters most is the love we leave behind. John Wayne's legacy, more than just a cowboy. John Wayne is famous for playing tough cowboys and soldiers in movies. But his legacy, it's so much more than that. For over 50 years, Wayne stood for American values like strength, honor, and patriotism. The characters he played, they always did what was right, even when it was hard. But as Wayne's life ended, people saw something different. His real legacy wasn't just about his movie roles. It was about an off-screen man. Wayne wasn't just an actor. He was someone people looked up to. His cowboy and soldier characters made him a hero. Movies like The Searchers, True Grit, and Stagecoach didn't just make him famous. They helped shape an entire genre. Wayne wasn't just a movie star anymore. He became a symbol of toughness. Fans saw the bravery in his characters, and then they saw those same traits in Wayne himself. But in his final years, people saw a softer side. His last words showed how much he cared about his family. He wasn't just a Hollywood star. He was a dad, a friend, someone who stuck by his values even when the cameras were off. A father's last words, what they meant to his children. For John Wayne's kids, his final words were a mix of love and sadness. They reminded them of the affection he had always shown them, even though the world saw him as the Duke, a tough guy. Wayne built his whole career playing strong, unbreakable characters who didn't often show their softer side. But in his last moments, John Wayne wasn't the cowboy or soldier people saw on screen. So as a dad, he spoke tender words to his daughter, Asa, words she would carry with her for the rest of her life. "Now, my girl, I love you," Wayne said to Asa when she asked if he knew who she was during his final hours. It was emotional. It showed the strength of their bond. Those words hit hard for Asa and her siblings, not because they were surprising, but because they captured the love and pride their dad had always had for them. It was bittersweet for Asa, who was by his side during those last days. On one hand, hearing such loving words from her dad was comforting, but on the other, it made her realize their time together was ending. Wayne's kids had always seen their dad as a man of strength, someone who tackled life with the same grit and determination that defined his on-screen characters. But behind the scenes, John Wayne was also a caring father. Even though his busy career kept him away, he always made time for his family when he could. His kids often said that Wayne showed up for the important moments despite all the time spent making movies. He offered advice with the same wisdom he brought to his iconic roles. Asa, especially, had a close relationship with her dad. As the youngest daughter, she looked up to this larger-than-life figure, not just as a Hollywood star, but as her dad. In interviews, Asa talked about how much those last words meant to her. She called them to confirm the love and bond she had always felt. Despite his tough public image, she shared how Wayne was always a loving, caring parent. It was a side of him the public didn't often see. For Wayne's other children, Michael, Patrick, and the rest, those last words to Asa echoed their own experiences. Or each of them had their relationship with their dad, but there was always one common thing: his commitment to family. He believed in hard work, honesty, and loyalty. These were values he passed down to all his kids. His final words, simple as they were, captured the love and support he had always given them. In the years after Wayne's death, his kids carried on his legacy. Not just the Hollywood side, but also the personal values he had taught them. His final words were a reminder that, for all his fame, Wayne's most important role was being a father, the love he gave his kids. That was the legacy he left behind. Public reaction, mourning the Duke. The world lost when John Wayne died on June 11, 1979. He wasn't just another Hollywood star. He was a huge part of American movies and culture. Fans felt it. Fellow actors felt it. Even people who had never met him felt it. His death. It was the end of an era. Wayne was one of the last big names from Hollywood's golden days. He was known for playing tough guys. He stood for rugged masculinity and patriotism. But in his last moments, through his daughter Asa, we saw something different. A softer side. A loving side. One people didn't always see. When people heard the news, there was sadness everywhere. As word spread, tributes came from all over. Hollywood lost one of its greatest stars. But Wayne was more than that. He stood for strength, both in his films and in real life. For many, Wayne's legacy was about more than just acting. It was about values like honor, bravery, and doing what's right. His fans, many had grown up watching his westerns and war movies. They connected to him, even if they had never met him. One big thing people felt was nostalgia. Wayne stood for an older, simpler time in Hollywood. By the late 1970s, movies were changing. New directors and actors were bringing new ideas. But Wayne, he was about good versus evil. His heroes were clear. His moral compass was strong. It felt like the end of that kind of storytelling when he passed. It was a painful reminder for many fans that the world had changed. Wayne's colleagues in Hollywood also spoke about the loss. Fellow actors, directors, and producers discussed how much Wayne had meant to them. They shared stories of his dedication to acting and his influence on movies. Clint Eastwood, often considered Wayne's successor, called him an original. He talked about how much Wayne shaped westerns and action films. Directors who worked with Wayne praised his work ethic and said his presence on set would be missed. Politicians and public figures also shared their thoughts. Wayne's patriotism was well known. He had spoken out about his conservative beliefs, which many people admired. After Wayne died, President Jimmy Carter said Wayne was a symbol of everything American. His image was so connected to the country that his death felt like losing a national hero. For the public, Wayne's death brought a lot of reflection. People started rewatching his movies, repeating his famous lines, and thinking about his legacy. His final words, shared by his daughter Asa, helped people see a different side of him. For years, he had been the tough guy on screen. But in his last moments, his words showed he was also a man who deeply loved his family. People didn't just mourn the actor. They mourned the man who faced his final days with the same strength and courage that had always defined him. Strength behind the cowboy image. John Wayne's image was closely tied to his character's tough cowboys and war heroes who stood for courage and honor. But as his health got worse and cancer took over, Wayne's real life mirrored the strength people saw on screen. In his final days, he kept showing that same toughness. Even as his body weakened and his condition worsened, Wayne held on to the strength that had defined him for so long. Wayne had made a career playing strong, independent men. His characters took on challenges without hesitation. Whether in the American West's open lands or on the battlefields of World War II, his roles were all about facing danger head-on. That toughness wasn't just for the screen, it was part of who Wayne was. He took pride in being a man of strength and honor, values he had learned from a young age. When he battled cancer for the second time, Wayne faced it with the same determination people expected from him. Even when the pain got worse and his body started to fail, he didn't let it take over. He kept up his strong image. Rarely did he show weakness, except to his closest family. For Wayne, it wasn't just about pride. It was about staying true to the ideals he had stood for his entire career. But behind the scenes, things were different. His family, especially his children, saw how much he was struggling. Asa and the others watched him fight every day. They saw how hard it was for him to keep his dignity as the illness got worse. His body was weakening, but Wayne's spirit stayed strong. He kept going, just like always, even when things were hard. For his family, it was both tough to watch and inspiring. They saw the man behind the tough guy, a father, a husband, someone who wanted to stay strong for the people he loved. The public, though, didn't know what was happening. Wayne had always kept his private life separate from his public image. Even in his last battle, that didn't change. To his fans, he was still the strong, tough figure they had watched in the movies. Most people didn't see the struggles he faced behind closed doors. That gap between his public and private life only added to his legend. Wayne faced his biggest challenge, illness, with the same grit and toughness he showed in his films. In his last days, Wayne's strength wasn't just about the movies he made. It was about the person he was, both on screen and off. Even as things got worse, he didn't change who he was. To the people close to him, his last fight showed what he had always been about: bravery, strength, and not giving up. John Wayne's lasting impact on Hollywood. When John Wayne passed away in 1979, something huge had ended. It wasn't just about losing an actor. It was bigger than that. Not just for Hollywood, for all of American movies too. Losing him wasn't just about losing an actor. It felt like the westerns he made were ending too. Wayne had shaped that whole genre. His presence on the screen changed how people saw heroes. His impact. It's hard to even say how huge it was. Wayne's career was long. His career lasted for more than 50 years. He made over 170 movies during that time. Many of those are still seen as classics today. He worked with big directors like John Ford and Howard Hawks. These partnerships took westerns to a new level. Movies like The Searchers, Stagecoach, and Rio Bravo, people still talk about them. They show just how good Wayne was. They also show how much depth his characters had. But Wayne's influence went beyond just Westerns. He stood for something more. Things like strength, honor, patriotism. He was the model for action heroes that came after him. Without him, movies today would look different. His legacy greatly affected stars like Clint Eastwood and Harrison Ford. Both have said Wayne shaped their careers. Directors looked up to him too. They say his roles were a big part of movie history. Wayne's public image, it was always about toughness. Cowboys, soldiers, characters who did the right thing. And even after he died, his image stayed strong. Many movies tried to capture that same spirit. His love for America showed up in his films and real life. He left a big mark on how American values were shown in movies. After Wayne passed, he got several big awards. In 1980, Wayne was given the Congressional Gold Medal. Then, in 1984, he got the Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's the biggest award any civilian can get in the U.S. Those awards, they weren't just about his acting. They were about what he meant to America. They weren't just for his movie roles. They showed how much he meant to American culture. Wayne had become more than just a movie star. He was a symbol of strength. People admired him for that. Wayne's last movie, The Shootist, was like his real life. In the film, he played a man facing death. In real life, Wayne was battling cancer. It was a fitting goodbye for him. The movie did well, and people saw it as a tribute to the man he was. So Wayne died. He left a gap in Hollywood. No one could take his place. His name will always be tied to Westerns, but his influence, it went way beyond just one genre. Even now, decades later, Wayne is still seen as an icon. He stands for a time when heroes had strong morals. His final goodbye came in 1979, but his legacy is still alive. It's part of Hollywood and American culture. Remembering John Wayne. John Wayne's legacy goes far beyond the movies. He wasn't just a Hollywood star. He was more than an actor. He stood for strength, courage, and values that didn't change. His characters? They showed what it meant to be American. Honor? That's why people connected with him for so long. But off screen, Wayne's life had layers, especially in his final years. In those last days, people saw a different side of him. The tough guy, he became vulnerable. His last words to his daughter, Asa, showed that family was the most important thing. Of course, I know who you are. You're my girl. I love you. It was emotional. It wasn't just sad. It was a reminder that Wayne wasn't just a cowboy or a hero. He was a father. He was a friend. He was a man who had his own fears and challenges. Wayne's death felt like the end of something big. It wasn't just the loss of an actor. It was the end of an era. But even though he's gone, his influence lives on. His movies are still loved. His impact on Western and American cinema, it's huge. Actors and filmmakers still talk about him today. What roles did he play in Westerns? They shaped how people see heroes in movies now. He always played characters with honor and strength. That's the bar he set for others in Hollywood. But Wayne's legacy didn't stop with movies. His family started the John Wayne Cancer Foundation. It focuses on spreading awareness, supporting research, and ensuring people get checked early. Wayne's fight with cancer now helps others. The awards he got after his death, like the Presidential Medal of Freedom, weren't just about his movies. They were about what he stood for. He was a symbol of values that many people admire. Even decades after his death, John Wayne is still an icon. His legacy is strong. His final words to his daughter show who he was. He wasn't just a tough guy on the screen. Even in the end, he shows his love for his family. The Duke is gone, but his legacy isn't. He will keep inspiring and touching people for years to come.